Mr. Patrick Tay.
Mr. Speaker, sir, with your permission, may I take questions 17 to 22 together, please?
Yes, please.
Sir, members have filed several questions on the topic of workplace fairness, and I thank them for their interest in this very important topic. The tripartite partners' approach to enhancing workplace fairness has been a successful journey. Compared to the year 2006, when the Tripartite Alliance for Fair and Progressive Employment Practices, or TAFEP, was first formed, the HR practices of firms have improved significantly. This was the right approach. Rather than rush to legislate, the tripartite partners recognized that education to cultivate the right workplace norms and values was the foremost and more fundamental task. We did not want the process to become legalistic or confrontational. It is better if disputes can be resolved amicably. Year by year, we have progressively stepped up our efforts, including coupling education with enforcement against discriminatory employers, thus advancing the cause of fair and merit-based HR practices. Today, we have a set of tripartite guidelines on fair employment practices, which is familiar and well accepted by employers and employees alike. The vast majority of employers comply with the guidelines. If there is a complaint, TAFEP uses these guidelines to evaluate and advise the parties concerned. About 2/3 of reported cases are not substantiated. The majority are actually misunderstandings, which are clarified, and where both parties do not pursue the matter further. Where TAFEP finds gaps in employers' HR practices, TAFEP would counsel the employer. Most employers accept and make amends. Very rarely does the employer dispute the assessment and refuse to correct their actions. In cases where discrimination is substantiated, TAFEP would refer the employer to MOM, which can restrict it from hiring foreign workers. Therefore, the process of mediation is in itself an opportunity for employers and employees to close the gaps in their understanding of the requirements. We will continue to maintain the strong emphasis on mediation, even as we strengthen the legislation. Ms. Yeo Wan Ling asked specifically about gender discrimination. Over the last 3 years, about 1 in 7 reported cases each year fell into this category, most related to employers specifying their preference for a particular gender in their recruitment advertisements. In about 30% of these cases, discrimination was substantiated after further investigation, and the errant employers had their work pass privileges curtailed. The Tripartite Committee on Workplace Fairness, co-chaired by Minister for Manpower Dr. Tan See Leng, NTUC SecGen Mr. Ng Chee Meng, and SNEF President Dr. Robert Yap, convened last month and took stock of the progress that we have made. We recognize the calls made by members in this House previously, including Mr. Patrick Tay, Mr. Saktiandi Supat, and Mr. Louis Ng, for the tripartite guidelines to be legislated. We concluded that legislation could be a helpful next step to take, and updated the Prime Minister on our assessment. Mr. Liang Eng Hwa asked how legislation will achieve better outcomes. Legislation builds on the progress made with our current approach. With legislation, we can broaden the range of remedies available. This can benefit both workers and employers. For workers, the remedies could give them direct redress, rather than indirectly through enforcement action against the employer. For example, such redress is available for wrongful dismissals today. Employees can claim for compensation or for reinstatement to their former employment. For employers, curtailment of their work pass privileges, which has a significant impact on their overall business operations, can in some cases be disproportionate to the breach. Even if there is some mitigating factor, There are currently no alternative penalties that could provide for a more calibrated approach. Legislation will also send a strong signal that society does not condone discrimination at the workplace and further entrench the fair employment standards that were built up over these many years. The Tripartite Committee on Workplace Fairness has not completed its work yet. It will continue the next stage of its deliberations to define the scope of future legislation and design a legal framework that is balanced and in the best interest of Singapore and Singaporeans. This includes looking to how we can avoid the unintended consequences of fostering a litigious workplace culture, something Mr. Desmond Chu and Mr. Sharia Taha are also concerned about. We should have a claims process where mediation is the first and necessary step, and appearances before the tribunal as a last resort. This has worked well for the handling of salary-related and wrongful dismissal cases. To Mr. Patek's question, in the case of unionized employees, the union is involved in the mediation process today. This is something the Tripartite Committee should also consider and study for the new claims process. Anxieties about workplace discrimination can also be driven by perceptions. Not every complaint means that the employer has done something wrong. The process must be fair to both the worker and the employer. By adopting an even-handed approach, we can avoid a situation where employers are deterred by excessive legal compliance to further expand their businesses. Several members asked about how the Tripartite Committee will gather and balance the views of different stakeholders. The Tripartite Committee comprises a diverse group of business, union, government, and HR practitioners. It intends to conduct wider consultation and engagements with these groups, as well as the general public, to ensure its deliberations and eventual recommendations are well balanced. The Tripartite Committee aims to complete its work in the first half of 2022. The government will then consider its recommendations and, if accepted, start work to prepare legislation. In the meantime, I would like to reiterate that TAFEP and MOM will ensure the tripartite guidelines continue to be practiced and upheld. As fair and merit-based HR practices have already been promoted for so many years, even SMEs would be familiar with the requirements. TAFEP will continue to step up education and outreach, even as the Tripartite Committee continues its work. Thank you, sir.